1099 employee workers' compensation, New Jersey.
This is one of my favorite topics.
Oh, is it really?
There's an IRS test about what makes you an employee or an independent contractor.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that 9 out of 10 people that hire independent contractors would fail the IRS test, meaning that their 1099s are actually employees.
Mm-hmm.
We see this a lot in construction and real estate, in so many different fields. We see like, oh, I'm going to 1099 him, well, what's he doing for you? Oh, I tell him where to go every day on Monday morning at 8 a.m. Well, then he's an employee because you told him where to go and how to do the job. You just made that person a full-time employee, right? So people try to say I'm going to 1099 people because they don't want to pay that payroll tax.
Yeah.
And then they think there's a better tax savings at the end of it. And then they don't want to pay workers' compensation. But when it comes to workers' compensation, we'll stop talking about the tax piece of it. We'll leave that for the accountants. If you 1099 somebody, that's fine from the insurance perspective. However, that 1099 subcontractor then is required to provide proof of insurance. So we see this in construction often. I'm a general contractor and I hire Joe's Flooring to do the floors for me in multiple projects that I'm doing. I 1099 Joe's Flooring. I'm required to collect an insurance certificate showing proof of workers' compensation from Joe's Flooring, or else I'm on the hook for that payment as it would be a payroll payment to Joe's Flooring. So it trickles down that subcontractors are required to have workers' compensation insurance. By the way, the workers' compensation rules are written. And the general contractor, as we flow up the ladder, is required to collect and maintain records of that workers' compensation insurance. Because if an employee of Joe's Flooring that's working for me as a general contractor gets injured on the job, well, if Joe doesn't have workers' comp, it flows up to the general contractor and it would be on my workers' comp, would be where the claim goes. So it's super important that everybody along the line have workers' comp, whether they're 1099 or their employees. And depending on how the business is set up as well, will also affect how the workers' compensation policy is written.
So people don't understand, like people that they kind of what you were saying before, they just don't understand how a 1099 and workers' compensation they don't understand how it works. Why wouldn't a business understand this? Are they just kind of going by like old wives' tales? Like, do they just not understand it and they're just assuming a lot?
There's a lot of assumptions, so a lot of people start small businesses. They're technicians. They're not business owners. They're not business people. They're technicians. It's one of the best business books of all time, the E-Myth, talks about that you can either work on your business or work in your business. Many small businesses, I would say most small businesses, start out as we work in our businesses, not on our businesses. And so we don't necessarily have the right experts in place to guide us appropriately. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to this 1099 workers' compensation issue, and also I'll take this into how we structure an entity, the accountant doesn't always have the right answer. The accountant should be consulting with an insurance person in order to create the proper entity for the type of business. And then we can fill in the workers' compensation appropriately underneath that. So there's a lot of layers to that. And it's my recommendation to any small business owner is to rely on people, experts, to do what they do best, and you do what you do best. Mm-hmm. So I like to sell insurance policies and talk on camera quite a bit. So that's what I need to do. That's what I need to do best, and continue to do that, and then hire great people like you, Andrew, to do what you do best, to do the editing and the posting and content creation and everything else involved there. So, that's what it is.
That makes a lot of sense. It's amazing how people just kind of don't understand this. Do you have any like recent examples or any clients that you've worked with recently in this capacity?
With respect to that, we recently had an issue with a client who took some advice from his accountant, and the advice wound up costing him $7,000 in insurance because the business was set up in a way that put multiple owners on as a corporation and not as an LLC. There's tax benefits, I assume, on the corporation side, C Corp, S Corp, straight setup, as opposed to the LLC side. But when there's a $7,000 hit because of ownership, it wasn't taken into account appropriately. So those types of things happen. We also had an employee of a subcontractor fall off of a roof, and that subcontractor didn't have workers' compensation insurance. So major issues when it comes to workers' comp. And it's the old adage. Another one of my favorite things to say is, we don't have a problem until we have a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem. And when somebody falls off the roof,
that's a big problem.
It's a big problem.
Wow. That's that's intense. So I mean, not only, obviously you want to make sure you have the coverage, insurance coverage, but it's something where you need to talk to not just your accountant, not just the insurance company, not just, your attorney. You got to talk to everybody to find out, okay, what's the best, move forward here to get a broader picture. Just don't assume things, just based on what one person is telling you.
Right.
Is this the kind of law? Is this the kind of thing in New Jersey where it's kind of just set? Is there any changes to it, or has there been any kind of anything switched up like recently, or is it just kind of like this is how it's set up and this is how it's going to be? This is
how it's set up. This is how it's going to be. There's constant legislation, trying to move the needle and protect small employers. As a sole proprietor or an LLC with no employees, you're allowed to waive off of workers' compensation. I still always recommend somebody you have workers' compensation because you just never know. And a cheap comp policy for a small business, depending on the type of business that it is, could be $300 a year, $400 a year. So to just have that layer of protection, it's a cost of doing business, right? All insurance is a cost of doing business, whether it's general liability, cyber, or workers' compensation. It's all part of that cost of doing business, and it's there for when you need it, for when something happens, and then you can thankfully fall back on it. So it's always recommended that you have those layers in place to protect you should a situation arise.